So my name is Noel Brinkerhoff. I'm the editor of the local newspaper here in American Canyon, the American Canyon Eagle. And so I understand you guys are working on editorials. And so I'll just try and give you maybe some background, maybe a bit of a tutorial, and maybe a little bit of history. When editorials and opinions are very, very easily expressed pretty much any time. Started out first with just computers, but nowadays all you need is one of these. And basically you can, not exactly, I wouldn't necessarily call it an editorial, but you can certainly express your opinion. Long before you guys were born, social media, we didn't call it that necessarily, but it was social media. The opinion section of a newspaper really was social media. Before you had the internet, before you had the ability to communicate with somebody 10 miles away, 1,000 miles away, within a blink of an eye, you had newspapers. It was slower, it was a little more cumbersome, but this really was social media. If you wanted to express opinion about something, whether it was a story in the paper or just some kind of news, an election, whatever it might be, this is how you did it. You basically wrote either a letter or an editorial to your local newspaper, and they'd look at it and decide whether to publish it or not. The difference between a letter and an editorial, a letter is basically just pure opinion. It's just like you have some kind of feeling, some kind of thought about something. Like I said, oftentimes it's like, you write a story and it provokes some kind of reaction, and so you decide you want to write about it, so it goes in the letter section. Editorial is a little different. Editorial has a little more substance to it, and by substance I mean some kind of information, some kind of facts, something that kind of just gives more weight to what you're saying. So that's really what you want to think about when you're trying to write an editorial. There's both, the starting point is like, what's the issue, what's the topic, and how do you feel about it, what's your view? But then you got to start thinking like, okay, how are you going to back it up? Because any argument you make, whether it's in writing or orally or whatever, the more you can back it up with some information, some facts, some stats, some history, the stronger it's going to be. I think the more likely you're going to get people's attention, they're going to think about your viewpoint, and whether they'll accept it or not. I think they're more likely going to respect what you're saying when you can back it up with something. So, and someone asked me in another class about format and structure. I've always thought of, what I learned in school at this level kind of still applies today. Your basic essay structure still kind of applies even with editorials. You're always going to want to start out, whatever you're writing with your, as it called, the introductory paragraph, very succinctly, very clearly, make it clear or state what it is you're talking about and where you're coming from. What's your viewpoint? What's your position? And then the rest of your editorial, most of it is going to be that, what they call the body section, which is just, what are your facts? What are your stats? What is it you found that's going to give some validity to what you're saying? Again, it can be history, it can be quotes, it can be numbers, it can be other types of facts. Anything that really, like I said, gives some substance to what you're saying, and then you wrap it up with a conclusion, which is always some kind of, you're kind of reiterating, not necessarily repeating what your introduction is, but you want to reiterate. If you just repeat it, it doesn't sound as interesting, and that's the last thing folks are reading. So you kind of want to make it good so that you sort of leave that last thought in their head. And, questions?
Yeah, questions.
What is an editorial?
What is it? Like I said, editorial is, news stories are just facts. Whether you see it in the newspaper, you see it online. It's just facts, it's details. It's, you had an event at school when you're just talking about what that event was. An editorial is really about, what you thought of that event. If you guys had a rally, your news story is just about like what happened, when it was, what happened, what went on. But editorial is, well, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Why? Or did you hate it? Why? Do you think it could be better? That would be the difference. It's always like, what do you feel about it? That's really the big difference. Yes?
Would you consider an editorial like an article on a newspaper?
Like an article?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are similarities. Like I said, a good editorial is going to have some facts to it, some information to it, just like a news story would. The difference is, like, when I'm writing news stories, I'm supposed to keep my opinion out of it. It's very important for journalists, especially now more than ever, to really be careful, because as human beings, we all have our own opinions and viewpoints, but it's very important we try to like acknowledge that and keep it out of the way of just telling you what happened, you know, or what's happening, what's coming up, and that kind of thing. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's definitely part of the newspaper world because there's information in both a news article and an editorial. So that's why they're kind of in the same place. Yeah.
How hard do you think how hard is it to write an editorial?
How hard?
Yeah, like,
I think it just depends on how much thought you're going to put into it. It might seem harder now because it's, you know, you're still in a very early stage of writing. For me, it can still be hard for me sometimes, just because maybe if I'm having trouble finding the right facts I want that I think are really going to make my editorial strong. It just depends on how much work you're going to put into it and how much thought, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah.
What is the biggest takeaway of writing an editorial?
That you either won someone over, or you at least you get some kind of feedback that someone says, you know, I like your editorial, I like what you wrote. You know, even if maybe they say, you know, I don't agree with you, but I like what you wrote. Because that means they respect what you wrote. You know, you made you made them think about it. You created a reaction in them. So I think a lot of it has to do with just what kind of feedback you get from it.
Don't me.
Either one of you. So
How do you write a strong editorial?
again, that's where it comes down to both your structure and your information behind it. You know, you're making it clear what you're talking about right off the bat. Back it up with your whatever research you're going to be doing, and then, like I said, you know, wrap it up at the end in your conclusion with a good reiteration of what your view is. Yeah.
Well, where would you usually find an editorial, like on a newspaper or on the internet?
Well, they're kind of, in some ways they're the same. I mean, in my world now, even though we still print a paper, more than ever our readership is online. You know, it's now in electronic form. So if you go to the Napa Register, you're going to see under that menu bar, you're going to see an option for opinion. It's usually that's how it's going to be labeled. And if you go to the opinion link, that's your editorial page. So it still exists, whether it's like I said, print form, electronic form. It's all there. It's a question of just finding it. The basic structure of a newspaper is still around. It's just been moved into an electronic form so people can access it easily now.
What are common mistakes that people make when writing an editorial?
I think probably mixing it up with a letter to the editor. I think that's maybe it's just easy to think that it's just I'm supposed to just you know offer my opinion and my feelings and that's it. And like I said, it might still get published, but it's going to be a letter. And I think people they know there's a difference between a letter and an editorial, and they're expecting more from an editorial. And like I said, that's where it comes in, where you're bringing up your you know, whatever research you do, whatever information you got, because that's what's going to separate it from just pure opinion. Yeah.
How long does that take to write a good editorial?
It really kind of just comes down to, I think the research, you know, and that's just who knows. I mean, if you're on the web or if you're in a library, wherever it is, you know, sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes you stumble off your information your first try, and the first site you go to, the first source you go to. Sometimes it's going to take it maybe 10 tries. I mean, it'll just depend.
Ms. Wolf, you ready? Oh, hey, look at that.
So yeah, I think it just depends on it. And some of it may have to do with the writing. I mean, I know you guys are still young, so you're still trying to get a sense of how to write. This is obviously a new kind of writing from others, but also, I don't know if I mentioned this before, you know, there's a lot of similarity to an essay. So draw on what you've already learned as a student in terms of basic structure of a good essay, because a lot of it is going to apply to an editorial too. So, yeah.
How do you know if you have good evidence in your editorial?
Good question. I would say it kind of comes down to your gut feeling. It's like if you're talking about, like the election we had, and let's say you wanted to write an editorial about someone running for office. If if you found the information, the stats, or the research that back up, you think, your support of, say, a candidate, then you know you're on the right track. It's just a matter of being relevant. It's important just to find the right information that is talking about in some way your topic and your viewpoint. And like I said, always, it's a common expression, trust your gut, and it's true. Listen to what your stomach or your heart, however you feel it, is telling you. Because oftentimes it's telling you whether or not you're on the right track. Yeah.
Is an editorial based on your opinions?
Yes, I mean, that's where you're starting from. I mean, it's like I said, it's, the difference between that and a news story is you got something to say personally, from your heart. So that's where it's starting, but just remember that it's gonna be more than just what's coming out of your heart. You wanna back it up.
How do you write your hook? How do you hook the reader personally? How do you hook them?
That first sentence is really the whole key, and it's true with news stories too, but yeah, with editorial it's the same thing. I mean, you really want to spend some time thinking about that first sentence, because that is the first thing they're seeing. And if you write a sentence that, isn't that interesting, or maybe it's too long, it's too wordy, people's eyes glaze over and, they're not really paying attention. Or in the real world, if you're looking at something on the internet, it's so easy, to just click off something. It doesn't click with you, so you click off of it. So, yeah, spend some time on that first sentence, that first paragraph, because that's what's gonna grab somebody and make them wanna read the second paragraph, third paragraph, and so on. Yeah.
What would you recommend we should find our information from for an editorial?
I think it can come anywhere. I mean, there's obviously a wealth of sources on the internet. I'm not sure what's in libraries these days, but libraries will always be a good source. Because even if you're not sure what's there, as long as there's a librarian there, then that's what they do. I mean, they know where information is, and they can always guide you in the right direction. So even if you're not sure, especially if you're not sure, if you start on the web and you're not sure, then go to a library, and then talk to a librarian, because they will guide you.
Okay.
How long is an editorial usually?
I would
Is
just
it
say,
like a word count or?
yeah, no, I mean, in our case, I don't know if we have, there probably is some limit, but rarely do people write so long that we would cut it off. All I would just say is, it's definitely more than a paragraph and, a page, so to speak, maybe, but, it can certainly vary.
Any more questions? No? All right. I think we're good.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.